Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Welcome to our press conference, the press conference for the National Transitional Justice Working Group. Let me just start by a short introduction for the members of the group who are present. To my left is the Memorika Chambwa. She has the gender portfolio in the group. To my right is Tony Rila, is an independent expert. Yeah, so those are the people who are present. The other members of the board are not present, and I think on the last occasion we introduced them, so I think you are quite aware of some of their names which we can give you. So let me take this opportunity to formally welcome you to this press conference and thank you sincerely for taking up your time to come to hear what we have to say and for going to report it accurately or in whatever form you want to report it. To us, any publicity is good publicity. We saw the publicity last time, it was most welcome. You recall that on the 24th of October last year, we held a similar press conference in which we introduced ourselves to fellow Zimbabweans as well as to the world. And in that conference, we briefly outlined the objectives that we stand for. And one of the issues that we highlighted in that press conference was our relationship with the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. We said that one of our mandates was going to be to provide an interface between transitional justice stakeholders and official transitional justice processes. And these transitional justice processes, as far as the officialdom is concerned, is in relation to the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. As you know, the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, NPRC, has not yet been consummated. In other words, it is not yet there as an institution. But as a group with very high expectations about its coming on board. In other words, with great expectations that once it is institutionalized, we are going to work together with it, and it is going to conform to those things that we expect it to comply with. And you will also recall that in our group, we have thematic areas for the promotion of the truth, as well as gender, which portfolios fall under Dr. Frederick Father Chiromba and Memorika Chambwa. And these issues also arise when you talk about the NPRC. So today, the reason why we have called you is to outline to you the expectations that we have in regard to the NPRC. That is, we want to outline the minimum standards that we expect in any law that is crafted to operationalize a commission such as the NPRC. And in this regard, what we have done is to prepare a paper in which we outline those minimum standards, and that paper is going to be distributed to you after the press conference. So what I'm going to do is to simply summarize some of the issues that we raised in that particular paper. So what I'm going to say, therefore, is not going to be exhaustive and detailed, because the details are in the paper that I'm referring to. As the National Transitional Justice Working Group, firstly, we call upon Parliament to urgently set up the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. That is our first call. And once Parliament decides to set up the NPRC, we also want Parliament to take into consideration those minimum standards that we are going to outline, including any other standards that civil society, individuals, and any other people expect to be in the NPRC. We are also going to highlight the fact that when it comes to the choice of commissioners, these must be chosen in a transparent and open manner, taking into account the issues of gender, the fact that there must be an equal representation of women who are supposed to be at least 50%. And I'm going to talk more on that as well. And when Parliament then meets to consider the bill in relation to the NPRC, we want, as I have already indicated, that Parliament must then take into account those minimum standards that we are going to outline. So basically that is the framework in which this press conference is being held. So what then are those minimum standards that we are saying must be taken into account when the NPRC is going to be set up eventually and hopefully soon? These minimum standards that I'm going to briefly outline are by no means exhaustive, neither are they intended to be a panacea for the Commission itself. We are saying that these are supposed to be the minimum standards that we expect any commission such as the NPRC to take into account. So it must also be understood that when we talk about these standards, we are not in any way trying to say these are the only ones and that these are the only things that the NPRC must consider. Firstly, the NPRC must recognize that it is a constitutional body. That is to say, it is premised upon the Constitution. It is formed because the Constitution says that there must be such a commission. Because as you know, Zimbabwe is a constitutional democracy, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So it must be borne in mind that when the commission is eventually set up, it must be clear that this is one of the 12 constitutional commissions that is set up. And in the Constitution, it is quite clear that one of the purposes for which these commissions are set is to support and entrench a culture of human rights and democracy, to protect the sovereignty and interests of the people, promote constitutionalism, transparency and accountability in public institutions, and secure the observance of democratic values, as well as ensuring that injustices of the past are remedied. So these are some of the things that are outlined in the Constitution, and we therefore expect that when such a commission is eventually set up, it is of necessity to take this into account. And you will see that we outline these principles in the paper that I've said is going to be distributed to you. Secondly, we also want this commission to be premised upon an existing law. In other words, there must be a legislative foundation for this commission. So Parliament must actually set out to enact a law that operationalizes this commission. And this is why we called in the first place that the Parliament must sit and enact a law that operationalizes this commission. So apart from the constitutional foundation of the commission, there must actually be a law that operationalizes this particular commission. And in that law, we want to be included certain protection mechanisms which underlie the commission itself. And what are some of these protection mechanisms that I have to take into account past violations? Some of them are as follows: that it is important for protection mechanism to be put in place for the following groups of people. Firstly, victims and survivors. So victims and survivors are supposed to be protected, and this must come out in the law that is enacted, that there must be clear provisions for the protection of victims and survivors. There must also be provisions in the law that will be enacted for the protection of support organizations. These may be civil society and other actors, be they individuals, and so on. So any person who deals with issues that are covered by the NPRC must be protected, whether they are dealing with it concurrently, whether they've dealt with it in the past, or whether they are going to be dealing with these issues in future. And we also expect that there must be security of these organizations, that laws must be protective of those people that will be dealing with these issues that the NPRC will be dealing with. There should also be a provision relating to protection of witnesses. As you know, if you set up a transitional or a reconciliation commission, necessarily you call witnesses who are going to come to testify as to what happened and what they expect and so on. So there must be provisions in the law of protecting these witnesses, either by protecting their identity, giving them temporary accommodation, or giving them bodyguards where they are threatened or where their security is threatened. So witnesses must be protected. And in regard to the commissioners, we contended that there must be clear provisions that these commissioners must be independent and autonomous, and they must be chosen on the basis of their integrity and belief in transitional justice issues. As well, the alleged perpetrators themselves will also contend that a law must provide that the alleged perpetrators must be protected, notwithstanding their perceived actions in regard to human rights violations. The thrust or the idea being that there must not be extrajudicial dealings with perpetrators. There must not be unlawful retribution or people taking the law into their own hands when they are dealing with alleged perpetrators. We also contend that this particular law must also be victim-centered. In our submission, the victim is the center of any issues that have to do with transitional justice, including issues that the NPRC may be dealing with. So we want to make sure that all those laws that may be enacted and the provisions that will be in these laws will be such that they look first and foremost and primarily at the victims themselves. And we say also that in respect to victims, they must be treated with respect and compassion. There must be equality and fairness. There must be gender sensitivity in dealing with these victims. We also submit that the process must be inclusive. There must also be public information and public participation in all the processes that the NPRC may be dealing with. There must also be privacy and confidentiality. There must also be provisions for persons with special needs, like, for example, persons with disability, people with minority languages, and all other people who may have special needs. A law that operationalizes the NPRC must take that into account. And in regard to recruitment policy of the people who will be making it possible for the commission to work. We also say that it must be an objective process. So that, for example, you do not recruit perpetrators or you do not recruit suspects or other individuals whose mind may not be properly functional in terms of being objective when it comes to people dealing with transitional justice mechanisms. And one of the issues that arise in terms of Section 252 of the Constitution regards to gender mainstreaming. And in regard to the NPRC, what we have said is that issues of gender must be properly taken into account in the law that will be enacted to operationalize the NPRC. And again, as in the other issues that I was referring to, we've outlined certain guidelines that we want to be taken into account in the NPRC when it comes to when they are dealing with the issues of gender. For example, if you go to Section 17 of the Constitution, it clearly stipulates that at the very least 50% of the members of any commission must be at least women. So that must be clear in the law, that at least 50% of the people who eventually become commissioners or even members of the commission must be women. I'm not saying they must be 50%. I'm saying at least, and the more the better. So the 50% is just a minimum, and that is what we are calling for, that the law must recognize that there is that provision which must be looked into and considered and provided for. And in regard to the other issues, there must be gender-specific themes when the NPRC will be dealing with this work. And such gender-specific themes may include such things as to establish a particular unit to deal with transitional justice issues or issues relating to reconciliation in regard to gender. So there must be a specific unit to deal with that. Just like as the police, you will find that there is a victim-friendly unit in the police. So we also expect a particular or a specific unit to be set up in the NPRC. We also expect there to be a particular budget to deal with gender issues. So we do not want these things to be just said in passing or as if they are not important. So we expect there to be provided for a particular budget to make sure that issues of gender are dealt with and that they are catered for when it comes to resources. We also expect that in its work, the NPRC takes into account and undertakes particular training in regard to gender issues, that they must conduct other capacity development programs including research and the establishment of background to gender patterns on human rights and so on. So we expect that the gender issues must actually be looked into and catered for in a focused way. We also say that particular attention must be paid to gender-specific violations. And by this we refer to examples such as issues of rape. So we want these issues to be dealt in a particular and focused way. So there must be a particular attention to gender-specific issues, as well as in relation to victim-centeredness, that there must be victim-centeredness with regard to gender issues. We also expect that when the Commission is dealing with gender issues, they are also supposed to take into account issues relating to privacy and confidentiality, that when it comes to dealing with women, they must be held in a particular way, and all the other needs must be taken into account when dealing with them in whatever way. We also say that the media must also play its role in reporting objectively when it comes to matters relating to gender and so on. And that is what we are saying in relation to gender. And in conclusion, therefore, what we are saying is that as a group, we are available to support the NPRC before it is consummated, during its consummation, and after it has been established. We remain guided by our vision for a peaceful, just, accountable, and democratic society. We believe the NPRC has an important role in shaping and realizing this vision. We encourage the Parliament's Committee on Standing Rules and Orders to accelerate the establishment of the NPRC, as well as ensuring that the public remains informed of all developments towards this goal, and we remain open to dialogue from all actors regarding the way forward. And with that, I would want to sincerely thank you for coming and for publicizing our activities as a group. And like I said, every publicity to us is important. On the last occasion that we held another press conference, there was a very good publicity, and we received a lot of positive feedback. So thank you very much. With that, I want to close my brief comments and ask that if you have any questions, you are free to do so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a question.
Sorry, Mr. Kedam. Maybe you might want to tell us, you seem very positive that this is going to happen, the NPRC will be set up very soon. But almost 2 years after the adoption of the new constitution that mandates government to set up that commission, nothing has happened. There is no law, there is no movement. Have you tried to engage the authorities, particularly the ministry that is responsible for setting up that commission, to see if there has been any kind of movement towards that, the crafting of the law, or even trying to set up the commission as it is?
Thank you very much for the question. As I indicated, this commission is one of the constitutional commissions that are in the Constitution. So that it is going to be set up is a question of time, but eventually it will be set up. We are going to take steps to engage the necessary authorities to make sure that it is set up, but the onus is on all of us to make sure that this commission is set up. So whilst you may have asked what we have done, I think we all have a duty to make sure that this is happening, including every other citizen of Zimbabwe. So I think the onus is on all Zimbabweans to make sure that the commission is set up, because as a group we view it as strategic, we view it as important, and we would prefer that it be set down like yesterday. I hope I have answered your question.
It's, when it is set up and finalized, is it going to make you in retrospect, or is going to assume its mandate from when it has been established? In terms of covering the past injustice.
Tony will answer that.
I think the mandate of the Commission is to achieve national peace and reconciliation, which means to look at the history of Zimbabwe. And we would be very keen that they take the broadest possible view of that. This will be critical of the way in which the legislation is drafted reflects the intention of the Constitution. And if you read the Constitution, dealing with the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, it is stated in very, very broad terms. I think our view, which builds on, and this is not a novel initiative, I think it's important to say that the work of civil society and groups on this issue of national peace, reconciliation and transitional justice has been going on for at least a decade, starting I think with a massive consultation in 2003. And in that symposium, which was held in Johannesburg, where I think there must have been 80 representatives of civil society and many experts came to talk to us, we said the future healing of Zimbabwe must take the broadest possible view of it. And if you look at the recommendations of the 2003 symposium, it recognizes that there are many areas for which what would be seen as justice is just not possible. I mean, it's very difficult to go back to the 1890s and look at issues that would be, in current terms, be called crimes against humanity. But nonetheless, we believe that that story must be told in the broadest possible way. And the rationale behind that is that I think we have tried to take the most sober view of this. Healing a nation is not a simple task. The Commission has a 10-year life. But it is also open to the citizens to see that what we really seriously need to do is to heal the wounds of the past, to set in place procedures of peace so that conflict resolution in the future is done by peaceful means, as the Constitution suggests, and that we have clearly built for the future the kind of understanding of what has gone in the past and what citizens now need to do to ensure that peace and reconciliation remains in Zimbabwe. So, it's a long answer to your question, but essentially, the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission should look at the whole of history. But some of that, of course, is done, as I say, very difficultly. More recent history, you can talk to people, you can have witnesses, and you can talk about perpetrators. The further back it goes, the less likely you are to be able to find either victims or perpetrators. But there is an immense amount of stuff that needs to be brought together in a massive archive project for a start.
I hope you have answered satisfactorily. Any?
Maybe just in addition to what was answered.
Okay.
The way kind of objections to going back, probably say to the 80s issues regarding the Bukura atrocities in particular in the way objections from other political parties in the run-up to the crafting of the new constitution, and that particularly that part of the constitution that creates the APRC. Do you think there is now consensus even to deal with the 2008 rights abuses or the 2000 rights abuses? Is there now consensus among the political establishment in the country to deal with those issues and go back to them, or there will be again objections as and when the commission is set up to deal with issues that are happening now or in the future?
Okay. Remember, there's a brother or sister commission, the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission is tasked very definitely with contemporary violations. So things that you read in the newspaper that could be alleged to be torture or cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment and punishment. That is the purview of the Human Rights Commission, and we should be engaging with them on things that move forward. And as you know, their mandate is from 2009 onwards, and that's to deal with contemporary stuff. If you read about the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, it's very clear in the language that it says about the past, and transitional justice is even included. And I think that's why the chairman pointed out that what is really critical, over and above a setting up of a commission that is clearly independent and impartial and has the confidence of people, is the legislation itself. So the legislation must articulate what is in the Constitution and elaborate it in a way in which that constitutional section is adhered to. It should not, as we point out, take anything away from that. Now, let's be clear. These processes are difficult. They're painful. Right? There's issues of blame and shame, terrible memories, and they go back right across our history. In the work that the Human Rights Forum has done and other groups have done, asking Zimbabweans about their views of transitional justice, it's very clear we are still a very divided society. The very young don't think that anything before 1980 is of any importance. But some of us older people think that actually it was a very important period in our history where gross human rights violations took place. And people are still living, and you can hear in current discourse that's going on this week, just debates and confusions about what happened then. So that's very important. And so coming forward, you look at it and you find that, for example, you alluded to Gukuluhundi. Many people in Matabeleland think that is the primary human rights issue that has to be confronted. It's more important than anything else. Others think that nothing since 2000, anything before 2000 is irrelevant. So part of the really important part of the NPRC is in building peace and reconciliation, is getting consensus that you cannot look at the processes of reconciliation and peace in any kind of restrictive way. The moment you eliminate one group, you create problems. So therefore, this is where it's going to be difficult. And there are going to be very contested views about what is relevant and what is not relevant. And we have a young population. 70% nearly is under the age of 30. So pretty much they live in the contemporary era. The rest of the stuff may sound like history to them and uninteresting history. But actually what happened between, for argument's sake, 65 and 80 is of importance to a large number of people here. There was deep suffering during that time, and there was deep suffering during the 80s. And we cannot exclude any of those things. And that will be part of our view, is they must take the most inclusive view of what is national peace and reconciliation. And I think I can speak on behalf of the group that we would strongly resist any way to compartmentalize it and exclude any period in history.
Is there appetite, real appetite for this commission to be there? And also looking at the draft bill, what's your assessment? Does it reflect if the commission is to come up on the same template as it is in the commission, the draft? Does it reflect an independent commission?
Appetite is a difficult thing, and it's very difficult to construe what delay is. I mean, certainly delay in the last year and a half has been, what's the right word, obfuscated by the difficulties of coming to a new political settlement within the country. And there are certainly, if you would, ranking issues for ordinary people of what would be of deep concern right now. Well, certainly political settlement, economy, delivery of public goods and services. These are very pressing issues for people, and they're not trivial. Appetite for truth commissions, I think there's very rarely appetite in any government to investigate itself. If you look at many truth commissions, they've had to be forced from the outside. In the former Yugoslavia, in Rwanda, many places they forced them from the outside because it's very difficult, starting with the first, if you want, transitional justice process in Nuremberg in 1945 and 46. So there is no appetite for people to look at their misdemeanors. The bill, I don't think we want to comment on the bill until it's in the public domain. One of the things that we have stressed throughout, and this comes from 2003, transitional justice process and healing processes and peace processes will never have any effect unless the people's voice is paramount to that. These are not things driven by elite groups, these are driven by the consensus of the citizens. And so if you'll see in our recommendations and some of the pieces of reports that we've put out and opinion pieces, that is one of the things that civil society has said is the inclusiveness of discussion with the ordinary people. When they have spoken, we will know what the people want and what they will need. And if we don't have that, then we are going to have extremely difficult processes. And you will remember the constitutional process, that many people were very unhappy that in the end it did feel like an elite pact, and we went through long, complex discussions, and in the end maybe two political parties cut and pasted the thing according to their views, and many citizens felt left out of that. We would hope that that would not be the position, and I think that's one of the reasons why the civil society organizations came together, is to make sure that to some extent there's a watchdog process, and that civil society and citizens have as much say in this process as possible. So we would be deeply unhappy if the bill was suddenly to get pushed through Parliament in a quick way and everybody agreed on that. We would take strong objection to that, I think. It needs to be inclusive.
Yeah, I think Memo would want to say something on that.
Yeah, just to add to what Tony was saying, I think the issue of appetite is that the first realization that we have victims and we have survivors, and that in Zimbabwe there's a narrative that has not yet been said. So I think what has to trigger, just to buttress, is the citizens ourselves who need to actually come out and start really demanding that this National Peace and Reconciliation Commission be set up as of yesterday. And the pressure has to come because we need to know the truth, and we need to start promoting the truth to be told. And as long as we don't deal with it, I think there'll always be that issue. So, the issue will always be surfacing, and maybe at times that are not really good. So the appetite has to be really generated by us. And I think the fact that we do have it, we do have a bill and it's in the Constitution, it is at least we have something to start with. So I think we need to just build on what is already there.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Nemo. I'm going to allow for 2 more questions or interventions. Taking into account gender balance. I'm a very gender-sensitive person. Anyway, you want to...
Yeah, I just wanted to... You said something about... someone talked about the political side of things. That's where my point. Considering and being realistic of the political world, political country that we are living in, how far true is it that people are going to be so open as to what Memory was saying in the issues that they want to be tackled at, considering its current political, or even after the commission is established? I think the political aspect is going to be of much, I don't know, will you tell us? Not being affected and being very in its conducting of business.
I think we can only hope that the commission will be independent and will conform to those minimum standards that I was trying to outline. But when it comes to it dealing with members of the public or members of the public having to want an input in regard to how the commission must stand, then I think we must realize that members of the public are protected in terms of their freedoms in the Constitution: freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of the media, freedom to do whatever and say whatever they want. So people can actually capitalize on those freedoms and say and deal with whatever the issues they want to deal with without fear of any political reprisals, because you can then have recourse to the Constitution. But if you are referring to perhaps the independence of the commission, that is precisely what we were talking about, that we expect the commission to be independent, realizing that it is a constitutional commission, that there are certain constitutional fundamentals that it must abide by, that in its operationalization and in the framework of the law that is going to be passed, certain minimum standards must be applied to it. So we hope that all those must be taken into account. This is why we are actually being proactive to say this is what we want, so that people then debate about it. So we are actually setting up a platform for debate. Say this is the minimums that we are expecting. Consider them, propagate them, publicize them, and also call upon the commission to take them into account. That is precisely what we are trying to do. The last one, if any. I think there is no more burning questions. And I think with that, let me again thank you sincerely for coming to our press conference, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.